Thank you, Doctor. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I have to do this to you, but it's a job that I took. All right. In South Africa, we say, "Each job, each job." So I'm sorry about that, but the input has been great. Now, let me just call on the following people to come forward. We have two speakers, and then we wrap up for the whole day. We have got Mr. Churchill Otieno. Can you please come forward, sir? He has to catch a flight, so that's why this is quite important for us to make sure that he has time. And he's the president of the Africa Editors Forum, I think based in Kenya. Or is it Kenya? Or is it? Oh, okay, I see Kenya here. All right. Mr. William Bird, I saw him stepping out from MOX, Executive Director of MOX South Africa. And we're going to chat whilst he's still coming. He stepped out, but he's gonna come back. The idea is to discuss the M20, the role of the African media in amplifying African voices. This is a session I made a mistake about yesterday. And the voices of the African voices in the G20. It is moderated, or a panel moderated by MOXI, formerly known as Media Monitoring Africa. I'm going to ask you, Churchill, to maybe just share your remarks on this topic, and then we'll take it from there. Do you have the? Okay, you can stand here.
Thank you, Patrick. Am I audible? Good morning. Good morning. Just checking whether, there's a connection.
Is Lizzle here? Okay, let me get that.
Okay.
All right. You have 10
how
minutes.
Many? 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'll speak in summary. And I got the invitation earlier from Victor and Joy and the Prof to speak to the Gen Zs. Two words that I think Victor and Joel edited out, the word reject and the word seeds. Because when the Gen Zs of Kenya were doing their thing, they had these banners that said reject. And I think that's a very, very important word, and I'll come back to it in a minute. They also had the word seeds. They kept saying, we are seeds. They didn't know that the more they beat us, the more we spread and grow. Yeah? So it's a protest term that they used. But the Gen Z behavior is very personal to me, and I think personal to the media, because the first power they rejected is the conventional media, as we knew it. And they continue to reject the news media. It hurts me, but I've had to come around to accept it. But when we talk about the Gen Z, who exactly are we talking about? I think we're talking about people who've rejected everything around them. They eat differently, they dress differently, they love differently, they do everything differently. In Kenya today, we're asking them to go and register as voters, because in 2 years we'll be having elections. And they've refused to register. And my interpretation of that is that the Gen Zs have rejected their parents and everything that their parents believe in, especially and including the structures of power and how that power manifests. And not just that, that they now know that they're in the majority, and the credo goes that in a democracy, the minority will have their say, but the majority must have their way. And they're saying that they must have their way, including rejecting the fact that even after being present, and every one of us knowing that they're present, we still require them to list and register as voters to be able to exercise their suffrage. So with that said, allow me to try and bring that home the G20 and also what we've come to know as the M20, which is a distillation of G20 issues in ways that are important and critical for the media. And because we are here, Center Africa Agency at the core of it. The first question and the first proposal that I have is that Trump is a distraction. G20 was held in Africa. Africa at various levels did do, I think, a fairly good job to try and surface African issues. But the final product has very, very little of Africa in it. But even after G20 has moved on, conversations that we are having must and should find a way to resurface those African lenses and African issues. At the core, we talk about the African Agency. But I want to invite us that act of de-emphasizing African perspectives and dimensions in that is part of a much bigger problem that some have called epistemic erosion. That the realities of the world today are centered in otherism, the way others think, rather than the way we want to think. As in media, the challenge that then offers us or presents us is how might we ensure that the news media, as we know it, the news media as valued by the journalist, comes close, is equitable to the news media as the African audience wants it to be. I suggest that today there is some value asymmetry in terms of what the audience expects and what the media delivers. So the invitation is, how do we fill the gap there? The second proposal I have is one of funding. That for as long as the media is somebody else's, we are lying to ourselves that we can recover African agency. So if you go back to reporting of the G20, who reported the G20? In whose tones, in whose language, and for whom? How many of African media picked Reuters copy, AFP copy, AP copy, followed it on BBC, as opposed to homegrown media agencies? The last point I'd like to make, then I sit down, is the whole question of information integrity. And as a communications person, I know, and I want to believe that many of us here know, that communication at the end of the day is emotional. And the biggest proof of that, think about how quickly we often are to believe lies, as opposed to the amount of evidence we seek before we can believe the truth. And we live at a time when there is information that is being distributed in our African population, much of which is created, but created using methods and approaches that de-emphasize and disempower Africa, especially when you talk about AI and the large language models. So there's opportunity there, but there's also a call for us to bind forces and try and recover in that manner. I thank you.
I just want to explain something. Thank you so much. You spoke like a media person, straight to the point, clear and crisp. All right. So what we had a situation where we ran out of time. So we decided what we're going to do. This is going to be the last session, and then we're going to do all the closure now, so that people don't come back here after lunch. Okay, so this session now, from now going forward, including the questions, has 25 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, okay?
All right.
All right, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't think this mic's working, so.
Okay. You've got, there you go.
There you go. Okay, good afternoon. No, still not working. Sorry. Can you hear me? Can I project? Am I projecting right now? No. Okay, learn something new every day. Thank you. All right, guys, thank you so much for hanging 10. This is the last session for the Amplifying Africa Voices strategic conference that's obviously happening here. And we're looking at amplifying African voices for the G20. Churchill, I know that time is not on our side right now. So we had to rejig a little bit of the program, so do bear with us as well. Churchill Otieno is the president of the African Editors Forum in Kenya, and then we're also going to be joined by William Bird, who is the director at Moxie Africa. It's formerly known as Media Monitoring Africa, if you didn't know. I was on a plane from Durban, and I landed, and I saw that all the work that had been done in the G20, there was some rebuttals, and there was some exchanges of words. So what an interesting time. And I'm in shock as well. So I think you might know more than me at this point, but I actually want to touch on the G20 and what transpired, because evidently we delivered a successful declaration. We saw the over 130 working groups that happened in the country in the build-up to that. We had different engagement groups as well. So beyond the Sherpa track and beyond the finance track, there were the engagements that came from the B20, the Y20, the L20. And there were also parallel and sideline engagements that happened. And this is where the M20 came in. It was disconcerting, it was surprising, but nonetheless, I mean, we had to soldier on. M20 had to assert themselves and make sure that the media is heard. Because if we're looking at some of the issues that have been spoken about over the conference, it becomes rather evident that it's something that cannot be ignored. And so with the declaration that had been handed over, there was, it was received well by the president, and so that was a successful feat. And so Churchill, I wonder if I can just perhaps open this question to you, and then I'm going to open it to the audience before William goes on with his presentation so that we can relieve you. It's hard to not ignore, well, it's hard to amplify African voices if we're going to ignore the loudest generation in the room, and that is the youth. And we're also just looking at, what has transpired when it comes to that troika system, because there is looking at what has been done, the build-up that happened in Brazil, and then obviously the current work that South Africa did during its 10 years presidency, and then the handing over of the G20 to the USA. I mean, if we just look at the response from Trump at this point, sorry, William, given the hostility, oh, we just ignore him. Okay. Okay, Churchill says ignore him. All right, or maybe he'll come around at the 11th hour, because it seems like this is how decisions are made. I wonder what this is going to do for the work that has been done and the progress that has obviously occurred in the country, given the solidarity that we saw amongst the other countries in the formation of the G20, and how this is now going to impact M20's mandate at large as well. How would you like to weigh in?
Thank you. I think we have more than we acknowledge. Yes? And we just need to sit back and organize ourselves using the resources that are available to us as Africa. There's a paper that we just published that says, that looks beyond aid and beyond fear and aid, given the disruption that is happening there. And maybe, Bob, we could circulate that paper to delegates here. When you look around Africa, there is a lot of doomism, but there are also good things that are happening. Prof just spoke about AFSA as splendid opportunity for us to bind together and recover some of that territory. I look at Ethiopia. If you look at the Ethiopian dam and how it's been, crowdsourced amongst Ethiopians themselves, it shows that there's indeed enough resources in Africa that we can organize to confront some of the issues that we have to confront today. Out of the G20 process, including the M20 in South Africa, there is a huge body of knowledge that even as the conversation goes on at a global level, we must have another level that speaks to us in Africa and that can then be transformed into actions that are practical, realistic, and speak to our own agency. Thank you.
Absolutely, and that's where we caution against it becoming tokenistic or just, speaking many words, but actions don't follow. So thank you for raising that. I'm just going to quickly open it up to the floor. Okay, great. There is a hand up there. In your capacity that you exist, I can see another hand up there. And thank you. Someone will come and bring you the microphone. Just introduce yourself and then pose your question. The capacity also stand. Okay, it's Sanusha. Hello. And then obviously who you'd like to direct it to. William is then going to give us a presentation on what has transpired since the M20 declaration was handed over and following the G20. Thanks, Sanusha.
Hi, Liesl. How are you?
I'm good. It's nice to see you in person. I always see you only virtually. So thank you for joining us in the 011.
Thank you. I'm going to be brief, but I'm going to be a little bit blunt because I'm tired, right? Two things struck me about the discussions and talking about it as a closing remarks as well. One is the issue that we have to transactionalize Trump. Don't give him energy, don't give him airtime, don't give him any ventilation. Because that's what he thrives on. And the point is that when he does that on social media or whenever when he posts things, he's waiting for you to give him that ventilation. So when he posted yesterday about he's going to not invite South Africa to the G20 summit, nobody understood that the G20 summit is not the G20. It is 100 and something meetings of how many different engagement tracks within the Sherpa and with the finance track. You can't react to Trump because he wants you to react to him. So I think that's the frustration with media, is that you look at something on social media, you take something, and then it becomes part of a reality. There's no fact check. Please fact check stuff. The second point is the idea that you respond to this notion that South Africa is not going to be in the room. How do we know that? Because you now have different dynamics around the fact that a G20 summit can actually be not a summit rather, a G20 set of engagements within the finance track and the Sherpa track can happen online. And the third point is, how many of the media read the declaration? The whole declaration must have been very interesting, how many times, whatever, and I've heard this narrative that there wasn't strong enough language. The last paragraph of that declaration tells you that there was a preemptive strike in the discussion that we are going to basically, look towards the G20 presidency by the US, but we will meet again in 2027 in the UK. So that means South Africa, not necessarily with the Troika, but with maybe the members of who's going to lead the G7, which is France. They're working on something as well. So they preemptively decided this, and the media doesn't pick it up. So I think you have to also start to think about what is your news that you want to think about in the G20. And then the last point is, we don't know what's going to happen in the US. There's midterms. I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you. So Churchill and William, is this something you're going to touch in your presentation, William, or would you like to respond? Okay. Churchill, so there were 4 points, obviously, that Sanusha had highlighted. What would you like to respond to? And then you need to run. So you can wrap up. You're going to miss your flight. All right, hold on.
I think on Trump, we are together. She just reinforced that Trump is a distraction. He'll come and go. The issues that we must address, we must confront those issues. And we must find solutions to them. He's doing his thing. Maybe it makes sense to him. He happens to be in a big stage, so everybody seems to see what he does. But at the end of the day, we have an opportunity that we must take advantage of now. On the media, it's a challenge to me and my colleagues, and I accept that challenge. I know the systemic issues that we have in the newsrooms, but that cannot be an explanation to the gaps that we have. Yeah, I think it's a challenge we must take. We must stretch ourselves in our newsroom and in our media. At the end of the day, it comes back to the question that I said, Africa cannot rely on other people's media to tell our story, or to tell its story. We must grow our own media, we must make it strong, and we must make it fit for purpose. And the media is not about journalists only, it's about our Africanness, it is about our vision. Thank you.
The fact-checking issue is a major thing. Thank you for speaking to that, Sanusha. Even cautioning against the release of press release journalism and reactionary, where people just take things off of social media or from press releases, and they're not innovative enough when it comes to what goes into investigating. And that again speaks to the resources issue, the skills capacity, the juniorization of the newsrooms. So it's a multi-pronged approach and effect as well. William, would you like to respond at this point, or can I also take another question? Okay, so William will then respond to your other questions, Sanusha, when he does his presentation. Okay, there's a hand there. Let me just go to the lady at the back. You can. How long does he have? Okay, all right. Can we please give it up for Churchill? Thank you, thank you. All right, travel safely. Oh, I guess the work never sleeps. All right, Churchill is going to leave us now. So the lady at the back, I can't really see that far, but if you can just introduce yourself, the capacity you're standing in, and then you're welcome to pose your question.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I hope the editor from Moxie can hear this. I'll be quick because I know that he's leaving, about the person that was arrested for imparting a comment. That just means we have more freedoms. That's all that means. So, I'm here because of Amplifying African Voices, and from the talks, I did and gather that we need reconciliation in Africa, so we need to be able to identify and speak up about what we need, what we want more of, and what we want less of. And this reconciliation could be really helpful in identifying where Africa went mentally unhealthful. So someone was talking about, I'll elaborate, someone was talking about how Gen Z is expressing their dissatisfaction with the laws and the bills that are passed. And they are able to do that because they are connected to the rest of the world digitally, so they know the right behaviors to adopt, they know what is behaviorally correct. And what is happening with Africa right now is that we are being excluded. We are being excluded from the rest of the world's economy because we are in a mentally, behaviorally unhealthful situation where we are excluded. What this means is that we need to reconcile and find out where we went ill, where the division was, how we can connect, what the satanizing of Gaddafi meant to the rest of Africa, and as well as how we can grow from that. Because if someone is satanized for wanting Africa to be united, the rest of Africa will be uninspired to want to voice out what they want and what they don't want. For Africa, for Amplifying Voices, to amplify our voice, we'll need to find out how we can be more mentally healthful. And this starts with an individual. What behaviors am I adopting? What has happened to Kenya? Kenya, when Obama was president, they were golden childed, and the rest of Africa, their shilling was up. They were golden childed. And when Obama went down, they started getting the scapegoat brand, where now they're being excluded by if they were getting assistance from Obama, they're now not getting that. In fact, they're getting oppressed from the president that presided or preceded Obama. So this behavioral dysfunction is not only global, but it is it's up to every individual to solve mental healthfulness and mental wellness and what is acceptable behavior within a small group, so that we can take these special skills and tools and know when Africa is being marginalized in favor of not making Europe and or the rest of the global north feel embarrassed. So they use Africa for regulating. So we need to stock up on our special skills in mental wellness and mental health, so that we can access our abundance or our abundant mentality and Ubuntu that we have in Africa.
All right. Is that the final point? And
that was the point
okay,
that
perfect.
we'll need.
Thank you. So you're speaking to also completing that global story by making sure Africa's voice is heard and is added to that. So thank you for that, and also the aspect about narratives and who controls it. William, I think you are now going to give the presentation. You can respond to the questions as well from Sanusha, and then we'll continue after that. Thank you.
I'll just unplug this technology, man.
Do you want the number?
There's a mic here. Aha. Right. I'm using the. Oh, there you go. It was there. It's gone apparently. Yoo-hoo. Okay, there it is. I'm using the presentation just because I've got a QR code there to download the M20 Johannesburg Declaration. And I just wanted to take a moment to unpack what that M20 declaration and what the M20 actually is. So India started this idea of wanting to put media issues into the G20 agenda. It was taken further with a bit of a gathering in Brazil, and then when it came to South Africa, we looked at this and we decided that there needed to be a clear and urgent focus on these issues. Because if we talk about narrative, it's controlled these days by media, not journalism media, but by the biggest dark forces that are running the world now, being the social media platforms, broadly speaking, right? They're controlled and they're in cahoots with our dear friend Donald Trump. Right? There's a reason why Elon Musk and the head of Zuckerberg, the head of Google, OpenAI, all of these people were all only too willing to be seen at Donald Trump's inauguration, right? And why whatever one of Donald Trump's first things that he did when he came to power was remove the restrictions and the guidelines that they'd put in place around AI. And these things matter profoundly because whether we like or want to take cognizance of whether Trump is there or not, the critical issue is that those companies are structuring our dialogues, the narratives that we use across the continent. They are extracting our data from us. They're perpetuating all of the kind of stereotypes that we have. And yes, we can use them to do a lot of good, as we've seen, but overwhelmingly the control and power of those things vests in the hands of a few very dodgy, very unfortunate white men. One of them being the most unfortunate, Elon Musk, who sadly is a South African, even though we try and deny it. Anyway, this is what M20 was. This is what it was set out to do, to help alert people to what's going on. There's 6 themes and key pillars of the M20. Information integrity. This is around journalism ethics, uncovering disinformation, deepfakes, demanding accountability from technology companies and their AI tools. It's around looking at artificial intelligence, worrying about copyright, compensation rules for use of journalist content. And in fact, there's a growing movement around AI companies destroying other content creators whether you are a person who would otherwise give advice on the manufacturing of different things. Now that you don't, you'll lose your business because AI has gone and scraped your site and taken away all of your expertise, and it now renders it to anyone across any number of platforms. So these AI systems are harvesting all of our stuff on a continuous basis and taking further traffic away from our sites, from the people, from the content creators that are there. The critical issues around media viability. In this instance, we're talking about journalism viability, right? So one of the reasons they don't or had so few people to cover the G20 is because there's so few people left in the newsrooms. There's so few journalists that are there. So if you get faced with an option of saying, are we going to use the copy from a respected international news agency, or are we going to dedicate time and resources to sending a person there when there are all these other important things happening in our own countries? Depending on what your newsroom feels about that, you may well decide to just take the copy. All of these things are kind of self-perpetuating in terms of feeding those beasts in North America. Safety is one of the most critical issues in relation to media and our online environment and our online world, right? If you're a woman online, you're going to be threatened, demeaned, attacked, doxxed, humiliated, all of those sorts of things, especially if you voice any kind of an opinion. And that is fundamentally bizarre and repugnant that this is what we have allowed the state of social media to operate as. And of course, it's endorsed and entrenched and firmed up by misogynist-in-chief Donald Trump, right? Because that's what he does. When he goes and calls a respected journalist and says, "Quiet piggy," it's a small, short phrase, but what it's doing is mainstreaming misogyny in a way that few other people are able to do. If you look at the rise of misogyny and how it's been allowed to flourish under this Trumpian agenda, it again speaks to how it undermines all of the kinds of things that we would like to reference in relation to dignity and equality for people. Women in media, again, there's particular issues in relation to technology-facilitated gender-based violence. And then what's really interesting about this Joburg Declaration is there's a theme on it in relation to that and children and young people. And this is really quite remarkable because there was a comment earlier about where are the young people in these conversations. Until and unless we start to acknowledge that Africa is the youngest continent and that we need to make sure that young people's views and voices and stories are told, they're never going to have an interest in news media. We've been doing research on children and media for the last 23 years. One of the consistent findings, whether it's in South Africa, in Zambia, in Kenya, in Zimbabwe, in most of the SADC countries, you'll find that children's views and voices hardly reflect. Why on earth do we think young people are going to turn to anywhere else that speaks to them when the news organizations that are there theoretically to give the news have systematically marginalized them for the last 40 years? Like, what do you think is going to happen, especially when there's something that's engineered to wire their brain towards something that is like crack cocaine, which is what social media platforms, algorithms deliberately are engineered to do, to keep them there, to hype, to build up all of those things, and they work in a way that entrenches all of those things. Now, I did want to show you a quick video about the dangers of AI. There was this video that was posted on one of our government communicators' things. It was when we actually did the handover to President Ramaphosa, but I'm not going to show it to you because it's 2 minutes too long. But what I was talking about was very bad things are happening in South Africa, and the president laughed and said, yes, very terrible things. We were making fun of Trump, right? Now, the thing that happened just after that was that this guy, who's got a lot of followers, bumped up that video so that it started to go viral. And at the time that he posted this, there were over 1 million views of that video. And so someone then asked Grok, who are the main speakers in this clip? And what did Grok do? Grok said the main speakers in the clip appear to be former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who's imitating Donald Trump's speaking style. And then Hein said, nope, this guy have curly hair. Right? Which was me. And it said, thanks for pointing it out. But it says, Trump, the man imitating Trump does have curly hair, and it still looks like Boris Johnson to me. Right? So Grok was like really insistent on this. Now, I mean, it's a light and ridiculous example of how we shouldn't be trusting AI. But the European Broadcasting not agency, authority, they recently they tested the AIs against broadcasting stories and found that 48% of them got material facts wrong when AI was interpreting their stories. 48%. So even as good as it seems on that level, it's still getting material facts wrong in just under half of all stories that are there. And yet what we're seeing is that more and more people, when you do a standard search, you ask a question on your device, on anything, it's going to give you an answer that it's extracting from various AI sources. If it doesn't have the information, it'll make it up, as it did here. Now, we think that the reason Grok actually gave this answer is that some years ago, Boris Johnson did actually mimic and make fun of Donald Trump in 2019, apparently. But anyway, be that as it may, it highlights just how fantastically inaccurate AI is. And we know that for African languages, it's completely useless. And we know that for most of the knowledge that is on this continent, AI is hopelessly inadequate. But it's eating and stealing all of your data, so it's going to get a lot better. So where we're taking the M20 forward is that we are working with a group of US organizations to try and see if they are going to be able to run a Media 20 in America in 2026. But even outside of that, what we've decided already is that there's going to be a steering committee of India, Brazil, and South Africa that is going to continue to drive the M20 process. So there's going to be a media integrity monitoring framework that's going to continue to track annual G20 commitments on information integrity, journalist safety, and media viability, and an information integrity index, so that we're going to start to try and hold some of these elements and bring about and promote some level of accountability. So the M20 is really important, we think, because it's an effort driven by, when we had the summit, there were people from 19 countries, overwhelmingly dominated by the continent. At the summit, Liesel was there on all the days, and it was an incredible thing to see the support and how common the kinds of issues that we raised there are around the world. And this is why I wanted to give you the slide. Here's where you can go, and if you just use the QR code, you can go and read the Joburg Declaration. There's a lot of really good information in there that, again, is brought around by experts from around the globe, Global South, some from the Global North, looking at those 6 themes. And I'll leave it there and I'll leave it up.
Thanks. Thank you. Please can we give it up for William? Thank you. Thank you for speaking to the pillars and for rehashing the work that had been done in the build-up to the handover of that declaration, and obviously just the lashback that was received thereafter, and really where to from here as well. The aspect about children and the incorporation of marginalized groups, I wonder if you can just speak to that as well, ensuring that there is that representation, especially when it comes to policies and political circles. I'm asking this because we know there's that deep creative economy as well. We can also see the consumption methods changing. Podcasters, YouTubers, youth are tapping into that consumption in a different way. How do we better leverage off of that and ensure that they're incorporated rather than made to be the enemy, especially when we have to look at credibility and safeguarding against misinformation and disinformation?
So,
do you want to, okay?
I mean, you were asking me. So if you look at the really cool and innovative things that are being done by digital content creators on the social media platforms, so many of those are African young people doing their own thing, coming up with their own ideas. And what it's calling for is a recognition of the value and importance of accurate, credible, and reliable information. Because without that, you can't hope to have any kind of a democratic sense of engagement. So what is needed is for greater recognition of the role that people who commentate on news, or comment on news, people that help inform and unpack and deepen our understanding of current affairs and of these kinds of events. And that at the same time, as you say that, we're not just talking about anyone, because of course what Fox News does, I mean, the only kind of news that they have is actually in their name. For the rest of it, it wouldn't meet any kind of general levels of journalistic standards. So it is about, again, talking about why we have bodies like the African Editors Forum. It's about talking why we have bodies like NIMCA, which is the Network of Independent Media Councils of Africa, because we are talking about mechanisms of accountability, that if people put content out there, and if it's incorrect, they can be held accountable, they can be challenged. Whereas, of course, the default for social media entities is that they are broadly unaccountable and that there's no real means of testing or verifying things. But as AI continues to spread, all of those systems are going to become increasingly difficult to determine. And again, my warning about AI is that they are overwhelmingly determined in the global north, according to global north ideas, standards, principles, and content.
Which then also speaks to the issue of resources and financing and creating sustainable models. Perhaps you can touch on that a little bit. We saw that victory from Google, that payout that's set to come over the next few years. But looking at what a sustainable funding model looks like, how do we begin to imagine that? But even cautioning against donor funding, because then who do you have to account to when it comes to the narratives and appeasing those donor funds as well? Perhaps you can weigh in on that front.
So what Liesel's referring to is there was a Competition Commission inquiry just recently in South Africa, and there's some really incredible things about it. The first key results of that Competition Commission inquiry that's really important is that it said something that all of us know, which is that the digital media platforms behave in overwhelmingly anti-competitive and monopolistic practice. And that sounds fairly obvious, but it's really important that it's in a very big, formalized, well-researched, well-evidenced report, because it says very clearly and unambiguously that they behave in ways that are not in line with general and accepted business practice if you want to talk about how businesses should be run. The second thing is that it's the first time that we've started to get meaningful, on some level, response and accountability from these big platforms. So Meta, no real money changing hands there, but still there are some fairly meaningful commitments from them, and Google is the one that people are talking about. They've committed to 688 million rand over 3 years, which sounds like a lot of money, but their commitment to mainstream media, there's 14 that are considered mainstream in South Africa, is 71 million rand per year over 5 years, right? When you divide that by 14, it comes out at 4.5 million or something, which is peanuts, actually. Even if you take it at 7 million a year, it's still barely nothing, especially when you consider that one of those media is the public broadcaster, whose annual budget is several hundred million rand. Also, it's closer to, I think it's 1.2 billion rand a year. So 7 million out of that is nothing, right? It's just doesn't even begin to scratch the surface in terms of meeting the need and in terms of some kind of level of appropriate compensation. The other critical thing that emerged from that is where I hope we may actually benefit, is that when they looked at Google's monopoly on online advertising, they said it's pointless us trying to tinker around with this because the issues here are structural and systemic, but that the EU and the United States are both engaged in very serious inquiries and cases against Google for their monopoly on advertising. And so what our Competition Commission said was, whatever comes out of that and whatever promises Google then has to make up for and change their systems, we want them to apply those same standards to us. And that, if that occurs, is a remarkably that would be a remarkably powerful thing, because of course the social media platforms have very different standards for how they treat people in the global south and people in the global north. Whether they're young people, the rights that our young people have here are not the same as they are online as they are in the global north. And so these things are fundamental questions, not only of anti-competitive neo-colonial practice, but of very clear violations of basic rights to dignity and equality.
Thank you. Because maintaining journalistic independence and editorial independence is obviously key to the practice of journalism at large. I'm going to open up to the floor at this point. I remember the gentleman over there. You had a question. You can introduce yourself and then pose your question. And then just ahead of him, I can see you as well, so you can go next. On this side of the, okay, Kanye, I can see you. You can take the third question. Thank you.
Thank you. Weston here from International Relations Wits. I wish to respond to Sanusha. I wish to be explained to. What is it that G20 could accomplish for Africa, which previous multilateral bodies could not? Because structurally, power is still dominated by wealthiest economies. The same thing you see under the UN framework, especially the United Nations Security Council. So if I'm South Africa and I'm disinvited to Miami next year, why would I be so desperate to attend that forum? In fact, I would exercise power by, if there is a South African ambassador in Washington, to attend the summit. And that would be an exercise of Africa's agency. Secondly, ideologically, if I differ with the US, how will I find UK my ally or France? How will they two be my allies? Particularly, given that, for instance, France, South Africa has had problems with France given its domineering shadow in Africa's affairs, particularly at the AU, and even in sports at FIFA. So why would I differ with the US and look at UK as my potential ally or substitute, or UK, a former colonial master in Africa? I really don't get it. And I'm afraid we could squander this crisis, and it's important to us, provided to us by Donald Trump. We are likely to squander it to our own detriment.
All right, thanks, Weston. Sanusha, do you want to rebut now, or can we take the next question and then, okay, let's take the next question just so that we stay on track, and then, Weston, thank you. Sanusha, I'll give her a chance to respond rather shortly. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So my question is for Mr. Bird. The acquisition of multi-choice Bacchanal Plus, was there any discussion about that during the M20, as well as Starlink's kind of bypassing, South Africa's apprehension of their coming into South Africa by partnering with Vodacom? Yeah, I just would love your thoughts on that.
Thank you. And then Kanye, I'm just going to take your third question, and then we can give everyone a chance to respond. Thank you. Kanye Magubani is a resident analyst as well, alongside Sanusha.
I'll try. Thank you very much. My question to William is just going back to the pillars of the M20 that you presented. What stood out for me was the absence of being specific around the rejection of political interference in the way the media does its work. I wondered if that was integrated within the safety. Hi, William?
He's making notes. I can vouch. Technology,
right.
You know how it goes, yeah.
In terms of, the importance of this, because it's a global issue. A few years ago, an organization called Right to Know released a report called Spooks, the Surveillance of Journalists, which actually detailed about 17 cases, whether you're talking about the SABC 8 or you're talking about, you know, a number of journalists that were harassed, some lost their lives. And particularly in that report is how the legal system has been used. You know, there are actually laws that enable the state to be able to effect surveillance if they can apply for the surveillance under the Surveillance Act in ICASA. They actually can do it within the confines of the law. So that for me starts to be a very important issue to say it renders journalists powerless if those who want to use surveillance and other types of technopolitics, you know, to interfere in the work of journalists, you know, can do it because there's a legal framework for it. And so we know that there's journalists being arrested, tortured, killed, whether you're talking Africa or other parts of the world. So I wanted to find out, why was this particular, you know, aspect so vague or not really coming out as strongly as I would have expected it to, given how global and how important it is? Thank you.
Okay, let's pause it there. William, you can respond, and then Winston, I'll allow Sanusha to respond. Are there any other hands at this point? Okay. Okay, great. So Sanusha, you have the final remarks. William, go ahead. Here you go.
Thank you. Canal Plus and multi-choice. For anyone that's not aware, Canal Plus has basically dominated the satellites set-top markets for most of West Africa, the French-speaking, former French-speaking colonies, you'd say. They have, obviously they're based in France and they're owned by a particularly odious human being who has been charged with corruption and all sorts of things and has made his views on media freedom clear, and they align very much with the likes of Donald Trump. So they decided to try and buy out MultiChoice, and they are now the single biggest set-top satellite broadcaster for the entire continent. So we're now in this rather perverse and embarrassing position as the continent where the single biggest provider is owned by the French. So we did fight this, and the battles that we won were in relation to MultiChoice, ensuring that they retained the news services that they are and have been supporting on their platforms. Because of the biggest concern was around the fact that they would then either remove those news services or that they would just stop funding them. So they're part of the deal is, and they said this, they reported this, they called them onerous public service commitments. We don't think they're onerous at all. I mean, they are, I guess, but it means that they have to continue with those news services and independent news services. So it's going to be a lot harder for them to kind of take a line and get rid of them. So it means that SABC, 404, ENCA, Newsroom Africa, and the community channels that are there, and granted this is limited to those South African providers, will still be funded for the next period going on. So that was the concession that we managed to get in that particular process. Around Starlink, I mean, even if they get into bed with Vodacom, they still can't get around the BEE requirements. Whether or not the regulator ICASA, that's our Independent Communications Authority, whether they are willing to adjust, or whether the minister is required to amend one of the pieces of legislation to allow them to meet BEE requirements by other ways. In other words, instead of having a portion of essentially black ownership and control of Starlink, they would say, we will make X amount available in order to give, I don't know, let's say 1,000 schools or whatever access to Starlink, instead of, in other words, they'd make up for the BE effectively by funding it in other ways through a financial contribution. I don't know how they, as far as I know, they haven't yet got around that, but as we saw with Canal Plus and MultiChoice, they found a way around the monopoly argument. So if there's a lot of money at stake and there's a lot of very clever legal people, they'll usually find a way. In relation to the, you're right, you know, I think that's a very good point. When we were having the
Recording in progress.
Thank you. When we were having the discussions around the key principles, it was very much focused on information integrity, and the emphasis was on independence of journalism and themselves being able to adhere to ethical and professional standards, and that there are self-regulatory mechanisms, and that there is safety there, and that they are free from political interference. The issue of surveillance, though, certainly by the state, wasn't raised as a sufficiently big issue. It's certainly something we should be looking at. I agree with you. I think that's a really critical issue, especially a lot of the kind of technological backdoors that the various social media platforms have given to some of the big companies, and the ones that we don't even know about. We know that there are particularly worrying surveillance tools that have been made available to numerous states on the continent and outside of it that allow them to surveil users. So that should be there as a key principle, and I imagine that maybe next year we can push for that to be an issue to be highlighted. But that's a lovely point. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. And you can see the life vein or lifeblood of democracy is media freedom and freedom of expression and speech. So, Sanusha, it's over to you. You can succinctly wrap up in relation to Winston's point, and then we'll call it a day.
I'll be very brief. To Winston's point, I wasn't trying to say that you've got to go to France and the UK. I was making a point about how you need to think about the interpretation of what was in the document and based on the media. And the idea was that when you talk about this, we're reacting to something. I don't think France and the UK are going to be our panaceas. And this leads to the second point, and that is the responsibility of what Africa wants in the G20 now that the AU is a member of the G20. Having 2 years to incubate itself in the G20 since 2023, what's the strategy? And then linked to that is we can keep talking about the fact that these are actors in the international system that dominate. But I think what we saw, for those of us that were at the Leaders' Summit, is how it's the sideline meetings that were happening. And those sideline meetings were much more important than the actual discussion around the consensus of the document. Yes, the consensus was much more about the optics and the branding and all of that. But the very same actors that we're asking to take responsibility and have a strategy from the Africa side were actually making their own kind of deals there. So I think we've got to be careful in how we want to frame the narrative. And the last point, just to William's discussion, is we spoke a lot about the US. What about other media actors coming from other spaces and also trying to change the narrative or shape the narrative, in particular those media actors coming from China as well, those media houses?
All right, thank you. So you can see, with the declaration handed over and the G20 now also being handed over to the next presidency, the work has been done, but the work needs to be done. The work needs to be done well, and needs to be done well with all of us in mind. So human-centeredness at the heart of it all, with AI evolving, is something that we have to maintain. And perhaps also keep the robust discussions as we safeguard the democracy at large. Thank you for your time. I have to say, Flate, my stories 8. Yes. I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lizel. Thank you to the panel that spoke. Let's give them another round of applause. I think she did a great job under very, very difficult circumstances. I'm so sorry. I'm really trying by all means not to lose people before the time is over. But at least we have now come to the end of this great convocation that started 3 days ago. Can you believe it? 60 speakers have spoken between all of these sessions, from panels to keynote addresses. We've had discussions from everything from AI, digitalization, you name it. And now I do want to just express my gratitude to our partners. As Good Governance Africa, we're partnering with that center. Oh, where is it? The Africa Center for the Study of the US. They are doing a great amount of work. It's our pleasure as GGA to be partners with them in this event and many, many others. And therefore, before I hand over to our leader and convener, Dr. Bob Wekesa, I just want to say it's been really a great time. I've learned a lot from the various speakers, and I also enjoy the fact that there's been it's a different conference because of the different types of issues that we dealt with. We had young people in the arts. We had a number of things that were happening that normally do not take place in the conference. I think everything that you can think of that has been relevant for the discussion on the G20, we have covered those issues. And so I want to congratulate the organizers and the draft officers of the program, both in the selection of the topics, but also in the selection of the speakers and the panelists. And with that, I'd like to ask Dr. Bob to come forward, and as he does, let's give him a round of applause. And then afterwards, once he finishes everything that he needs to do, we won't come back here. We will just go out and have lunch and go home. I think I did a good job in advocating for your... I did a good job in advocating so that you don't have to come back here. All right, thank you. So when you eat, please leave something for me as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Patrick. I think another round of applause for our very fantastic program director. You know, a student came to me a while back, a few minutes ago, saying, look, I have a suggestion for a panel after lunch. But I can see that will not even fly. We cannot even start discussing that after what Patrick has said. So, Nati, I think it was you. I'm pinpointing him out to ambush him. But let me start by, again, thanking you all for staying course, going all the way to the wire, as it were. And let me also take this opportunity to thank all our partners who have participated here. I might not be able to thank all of you, but at least let me recognize again the program director and Good Governance Africa. And a round of applause. If you see yourself on social media and other platforms, you'll know that Good Governance Africa came through for us. There's a number of colleagues here who are research associates of ours. I think you can just stand so that they see you. We have a project called Global Powers and Regional Economic Communities. So there's a colleague from Botswana, from Cameroon, from Nigeria. I think a round of applause to them. I specifically mentioned them because, as you'll see out there, there is a flyer with a book that is basically done, is coming out. Is a book on how ECOWAS, EAEC, SADC, the Arab Maghreb Union, and ECAS, which is a regional economic community that is sometimes forgotten. All this work and how these regions relate with global powers. I think we can also give another round of applause to the guys in the front here. And I mentioned that and, give them gratitude because I worked very well with William Bard personally for many years, but they've also been partners in this. You'll not see their logo here because they are rebranding from Media Monitoring African to MOSI. I think we'll be seeing on social media and other platforms what MOSI means. Seems an interesting one. I think I also want to thank my colleague and friend, Mr. Chris Kabwato, whom we've just given a doctorate today, from Wits journalism. A round of applause to him. And Wits Center for Journalism is a great entity, so we are glad to be partnering with. Now, I can see a lady there called Kabaso Kabwe. We call her professor, but she's doctor. Maybe you can rise, Kabaso. I think Kabaso has been in your inboxes, in your social media spaces. He's been cajoling you and harassing you And so, so saying, I think all colleagues from the African Center for the Study of the US, anybody else here who you can rise so that we recognize you. David, Tluma, Alan, rise, so that we thank you. And Kennedy Manduna. Okay, as you might have seen throughout the discussions today, we have a very energetic lady called Sanusha Naidu, who has been on the front row seat. She was saying she's surviving on fumes now because she's been on this beat for nearly 2 months. But I think, Sanusha, you need to rise so that we recognize you. Sanusha is saying she's very humble. She doesn't want to rise to be recognized. But Institute for Global Dialogue, in fact, was officially appointed in the G20 for the think tanks. So it is. Dr. Duma is here as well. Right. No. Thanks. A round of applause to Dr. Duma. That is, for those of you who are not from these parts of the world, we have a university down the road. I think the Wits people are laughing because they know that sometimes we say, so we compete very fiercely with them, but we also cooperate equally fiercely with them. And so we thank you. And I think I can see colleagues here, Desiree Castas, Sebastian Sons, Jan Handrath, Aziz from Saudi Arabia that you saw, and Demian from Abu Dhabi. A round of applause to them for making their way. These are colleagues associated with the Center for Applied Research in Partnership with the Orient. If you find it a long name, just say CAPO. And you can always see it online. In fact, at this point, let me mention that tomorrow we have a workshop, a round table, at the Anthropology Museum on main campus, Robert Subukwe building, Middle East and Africa, you're welcome. It will be run by colleagues from CAPO. I don't think I'm missing anybody else. There are guys that we keep forgetting who are the colleagues of AV, the ICT people. I think you've seen our colleague who's been running around up and down, basically running in this room. So a round of applause to our sound people. Okay, there was a, I know Kabaso is panicking because she's keeping saying CDD. I cannot forget colleagues from Center for Democracy and Development, Accra, Ghana. And they are all here. That is well recognized. I'm hoping I haven't forgotten anybody else. Let's also then give a round of applause to all our speakers and all our moderators. You're all here. And I think there are colleagues here from an entity called Olives and Plates. If you enjoyed the coffee here and the meals, I know we didn't have a sit-down lunch, proper African lunch, but you know, I guess they tried, and so a round of applause to them as well. There are our colleagues here who are not in the room, but who help with the logistics. This is Antoinette Gauss and her team. I think they must be hearing this, so a round of applause. And of course, there's our main entertainment lead here. I think some of you might be able to try Peking opera, or what was it, the Germany opera, whatever it is? The Chinese opera and the German song. I know you can see I'm not very artistic, so a round of applause to her. Okay, so colleagues, let me now, if I've not mentioned you, just know that you are recognized by your mere presence here, and we greatly appreciate. Let me go on to just mention a few closing issues. One is that we intend, this conference is part of our initiative called African Agency Towards Global Powers. Out there, you'll see flyers for 2 books that are due out. I think we just missed the deadline for publication. One is called Africa in the Global South. The other one is Global Powers and Regional Economic Communities. We shall provide that information. The books are pretty much ready, and we are open to doing that. We also have another book in the pipeline called The Old and New Diaspora, which is also due for publication. Watch out for that. Following this conference, we are working on a number of books. One is Africa in the G20. Sanusha Naidu is one of the co-editors for that book. The other one is Africa and Geopolitics, Information and Digital Rights. I thought I saw our colleague Ivy Gikonyo here. Ivy, are you still here? So Ivy Gikonyo is right there. If you want to contribute to information rights in Africa from a geopolitical perspective, we welcome contributions. We also have another book in the pipeline called The Geopolitics of Critical Minerals, and it's being co-edited by my colleague Kennedy Manduna. So if you want to contribute to that, he is right here. You can reach out to him. We're also going to work on a publication around amplifying African voices, and I'm sure we'll be having a discussion with William and colleagues. I think that's what I wanted to mention very quickly. My last point, because I do not want to stand between you and the very humble lunch that we have out there, is to say that next year around this time, we're going to have a follow-up, our third Amplifying African Voices for Strategic Action Conference. We are now debating between New York, Nairobi, or Addis, because the topic is Africa and the United Nations. And we wanted to locate them either in Nairobi, because Nairobi has the largest concentration of UN agencies, or at the AU, because we have the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, as well as the AU, or in Trumpland in New York. I think people have already refused, but we'll still, we'll still discuss. But with those few remarks, good people, we want to say we are most grateful. Enjoy your lunch, and for those traveling, travel safe. For those still around, most welcome for the Middle East and Africa event tomorrow, Anthropology Museum, Robert Sobukwe Building, 9 to 1 p.m. And thank you very much.